What's up, listeners? Thank you for tuning in to the Figure It Out podcast.
Figure It Out podcast,
where we figure everything out from business, social media, marketing, and more, because we are always living that marketing life.
Living that marketing life.
On this podcast, we fuel marketing through education, inspiration, and motivation.
Fuel marketing
through
education, inspiration, and motivation.
I am your host, Frank Ianzu. In today's episode, our guest has worked in the fintech industry. He has experience performing behavioral economics research, especially in emotional decision making. He always wears a smile, very data-driven, super creative, graduated from Rutgers University. He has a passion for marketing and advertising. He is part of the Marpipe team. He can get you the best ads ever. All the way from New York, Brett Friedman. Welcome to the Figured Out podcast, Brett Friedman.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, perfect. So, first we get into it. I'll tell everyone how we met. The website, helpareporter.com. I wrote a quick, paragraph for your blog. What got you into blogging and why you do it, and then a little bit about yourself.
The reason I got into blogging is for SEO, as you can imagine, works pretty well, especially with Help a Reporter Out. And that's to help out my company, Marpipe. So a little bit of background on me. I'm the director of marketing and sales at Marpipe, which essentially just means that I focus on growth for the company. And I have a little bit of background in decision making, which is why I love Marpipe so much, because all we focus on is how to make people make the decision of purchasing based on your ads. As far as blogging goes, though, Help a Reporter Out is the greatest thing to ever happen. It is essentially well, you already know this, but for the audience, it's essentially a list of 800,000 plus journalists. You can ask any question you want, and people as wonderful as Frank will respond, and you can use their content in your article and morph it into something even better. You basically can get as many perspectives as you want, and that also helps with SEO. So obviously, I write the article, I include you. You're like, wow, I was included in this article. You tell all your friends about it, and now we have this mutually beneficial this blog post. So that's how I got into blogging because it works really well for SEO.
Marpipe, from what I understand, it's a software that tests what ads work best. So what colors, where should you put your text, what kind of text you use, and you can figure out what works for genders, age groups. Is there more to it than that, or what is am I right, or am I off track?
So you're almost there. I think there's the key differentiation, and what we really focus on are components within an ad. Essentially, the way that people typically do ad testing is A/B testing. I'm sure you're familiar, but people will typically test 2, 10, 15 ads even. But the thing that they're looking for is which ad performs best, right? And you say, you run 15 ads, you find one that works really well. You're like, okay, let me pour all my money behind this. What we're doing is saying, let's run 115 ads and let's find the components within those ads that make the best performers perform well. So what that means is that can be a color, right? 115 ads, every 20 ads has a different colored background, right? This one's red, this one's blue, this one's green. So we want to figure out which color is the most effective. And then within that, you might have a different model in every 20 ads, right? A different product in every 20 ads. And the key is that you make every possible combination of those components, right? So every model with every product with every colored background. And that's what allows you to isolate which specific model, which specific product, which specific color performs the best in your ads.
Basically, you guys are going to help people who run ads, right? So Facebook, Instagram, Google, any more?
So currently we integrate directly with Facebook's API. We're building out support for Google, and then we'll move into all the DSPs and other socials like LinkedIn and the Trade Desk, depending on basically demand, like what people want us to integrate with the most.
And how long have you guys been around? Because you're still relatively new, right?
Yeah, we're a baby. We've been around for around 2 years. Previously, so the way we started was as a full stack digital agency, and then we realized that people were more interested in our testing process than they were in just another agency, since there's literally millions of them at this point. So what we realize is that there are some people that do multivariate testing, which is that's the name for what we're doing. There are some people that do it, but they do it manually. So there are people who had floors of 20, 30, 40 creatives who were hand making hundreds of ads with one tiny difference each, and
Yeah.
then manually uploading them, manually running the data. We're pretty young, so we were like, why hasn't anyone automated this? Why don't we start automating what we're doing? And then there really turns out to be tons of demand because e- everyone is ad testing at this point. If you read any article about advertising, if you read anything that Facebook puts out, that Google puts out, it's all about creative optimization. It's all about test, 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 split test, find whatever works. We were like, let's make some software that does this for you, and that's essentially what we're working on now. We have a SaaS platform that will be released in its earliest form within the next month.
So you're still kind of in testing mode, beta mode, where do you have anyone, like any clients right now, or you're just kind of still working out the tweaks?
Yeah, so we have around 30 clients from our agency days that we kind of rolled into this hybrid. So we still do testing for them, and they are some of our first users on the SaaS platform, and they're kind of our beta users, as well as a few other people who are extra interested and smart and know what they're doing and can really give us the feedback that we need to make the best possible product.
So just for people who don't really know about Facebook ads and all the digital ads, you are let's say I have a mug, right? And I want to sell this cool mug. Your software will come up with different, like all in one click, not like you just said before, someone's making 100 literally 100 different ads, but your software will just make it in a single click and have all these different ads, and then eventually you'll see which one works.
So it's a little more than a single click, but it's almost there. Essentially, how it works is, let's say you have a mug, right? And let's say you have a brand, right? You have a logo, you have logo files. Let's say you love space. You want to see this mug in space. So all you'd have to do is download a bunch of space backgrounds, right? You could rip these things from Google. They have like label for commercial reuse. So you take all these backgrounds, you upload them, you put your mug in there, you put your brand, your logo on the mug in the image editor, and then that's when it's one click. So basically, you're just drag and dropping all of these backgrounds in. It takes you a few seconds, drag and drop them in, and then you click a button, and bam, you have 100 ads that have every possible combination of your mug, of your brand, of your backgrounds, and if you want to do copy as well.
That's pretty cool. So, kind of, are you eliminating like other not apps, I guess other softwares like Canva and Adobe products where they have to build their image or add like text in a different thing, then put it into your software, or can they just do it in your software?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it's actually something we've talked about a lot internally. We don't want to try and replace any of these softwares because they're so advanced and they focus only on the ad building, and we care a lot more about the data. What we're doing is we're going to integrate with these platforms in order to just be able to quickly upload the assets. So if you use Adobe, for example, you might have all of your creative assets in Adobe. What you'd want to be able to do is just pour them into Marpipe when you want to create your ads. That way you don't have to create it twice in order to test it, right?
That's pretty cool.
That's the idea, is that we would integrate rather than compete. And then so the other piece is like we really want to focus on the data, right? There's this idea of creative data. If you follow the history of advertising, they're kind of three huge digital movements. Like, so the very first is basically when the internet figured out how to monetize, and they were like, oh, we can put ads. Yeah, so I think it was 1990. AT&T had the first digital banner ad ever, which had something like 44% click through rate.
Yeah.
Which, if you know, like ads now get maybe 3-4% click. Yeah, so the thing was like incredibly powerful, and it was literally just this little like rainbow text that was like, I bet you're gonna click on this spot right here. Like, had nothing to do with AT&T. So basically after that, people started flooding the internet with ads. You got all the pop-up ads, you got every website you go to is just filled, and people were making tons of money. So that was kind of the first wave. The second wave was the attribution wave. So this is when people realized that you can tie things like demographic data to the ads themselves and say, okay, this ad was on this website, and the person who clicked it is Frank from from New York or from Ottawa, and they can get really granular information. And this is where you get the cookies. This is where you get all the quote unquote like creepy advertising, the things that follow you around the internet, the retargeting. They're following your IP address, so they really know who you are. And this made people billions and billions of dollars, as I'm sure you can imagine. But now we're getting pushback because everyone's all about data privacy, and no one. Personally, I'm sure you're the same way. Like, I don't want people to just have all of my information, even just to use for advertising, because I'm sure there are people nefarious enough to push whatever they want. The third wave is creative data, which is what's burgeoning right now, which is essentially changing the burden of data from the user, from the audience, from me and you, to the advertiser, and saying, okay, here's 1,000 ads. What we know is that this particular broad general audience, everybody in New York, tend to like ads that look like this. So instead of saying, okay, this is a specific person and I know exactly what they want to see, it says, let's make an ad that is beautiful for 100 people. And no matter who sees it within a particular audience, it's going to work really well. And so that's kind of what we're focusing on, is collecting this creative data that makes ads more effective than ever before without being creepy.
No, I think I like that. It's like that's very interesting, and I don't even know where to like go right now because there's so many rabbit holes we can dig deep into. But the creative side, and like I think no, like you're trying to do something new, and you're trying to reach people in not a creepy way, and I think that's awesome. How has what have you learned from like this type of I guess research and work that you've conducted? I watched a couple of the YouTube videos that you guys have, and you found out that this specific age group likes this specific color. What are some of the stuff that you've noticed that really surprised you?
One, I could plug to our Instagram, where we just started posting some aggregate data from all of our clients that we basically put together, anonymized, and made some like general high level assumptions from the data. One of the most recent ones that comes to mind, there are two actually. One, professional photography is actually much more expensive than amateur photography for ads. So, which makes sense when you think of the math, right? Let's say you're paying a professional photographer to take photos of your product that cost I don't know, $1,000 per photo, but they're like real refined, like beautifully edited, and like when someone sees your ad with that photo, they're gonna be like, wow, that's a nice product. On the other hand, you can get amateur photography, maybe someone on like Fiverr even, for $25. It's going to be nowhere near as nice. It might even look user generated, which people tend to like. And that ad can perform worse than the professional ad, but still have a lower cost per acquisition of the customer, because it was less expensive to produce. Cost per customer acquisition, by the way, I'm sure you're familiar, but is basically how much it costs you to get a customer to buy your product, right? It costs you $1,000 to make the ad, and you get 1,000 purchases, or you make an ad that costs $25 to make and you get 950 purchases. It's probably still going to be cheaper. I mean, depending on what your product costs and all that, it's a little more complicated, but you kind of get where I'm going with that, right?
So that's one of the datas that you found out, the one of the results that you found out.
Yeah, exactly. So essentially, we looked at all of the ads that we've run for all of our customers, and we looked at all of them that used professional photography, that had super nice, refined photos, and then the ones that were much lower cost and more user generated. And that was a huge finding across all companies that we're working with. Another really interesting thing that we found. So video versus image is this huge debate. Everyone is always talking about, oh, you got to do video. Like, video is big now. Video works so much better, and it's true for engagement. So videos tend to work better in terms of clicks, likes, comments, but static images still work better for purchases, which is also mind blowing. But it makes sense, because when you see a video, you're much more likely to stop and be like, oh, okay, like, what's going on here? This looks interesting. This is more content, right? It might have more of an emotional effect. But a static ad, you know what it is. You're looking at a product. You get X amount of dollars. It's kind of that impulse, right? It's like, okay, this thing's nice. I want it. Let's buy it. Whereas a video, you're sitting there, you're engaging, you're watching it. So it kind of makes sense that that's what the data shows. But yeah, another big finding.
I love the innovations and like the way you guys and even other people or other companies are moving forward with trying to reach out to get people to notice your product, realize your product, raise awareness. How important, like, okay, yeah, you're using a lot of data, but what about the creative side? Like, actually, not like being the human side of it.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we've also talked a lot about this internally, and we think it's really important to empower humans using technology rather than letting technology replace humans. I think that's like a huge fear, but this actually helps creative in a huge way. Helps creatives because what we're doing is we're essentially turning people into cyborgs, right? We're saying, hey, you could have 30 people on a team making this yourself, or one of you can make 100 variants so the rest of you can focus on the big ideas behind it, right? So advertising is a mixture of big idea and data, right? There's this creative element that is that high level concept of like, okay, what is this interesting catchy thing that we're presenting to people? What's going to get them to be like, oh wow, this is cool. And then the data part is just testing all of those ideas. And I think it's really important that you have both components. You have an army of people to come up with really good ideas, and then you have a rigorous testing system to figure out which ideas are actually good and actually work on your customers, because you might think your idea is brilliant. In fact, I think most people, when they come up with an idea, like, wow, this is the greatest thing to ever happen,
Yeah.
but you really don't know until you actually test that on reality, and on your customers in particular.
Yeah, ABT, always be testing. So kind of, yeah, I don't know if you know about me, but like I lived in China and I recently got back, but I was there for a long time. And the way they do marketing and the way North America does is obviously not the same, but they have a lot of money, they have a lot of technology, they have a lot of stuff that we don't have. And now that I come back here and I can see some of the stuff where we're kind of not, we are like North America's kind of lacking and kind of behind, and where they're thriving, and like kind of like people here don't understand how fast they're moving. And what you're saying now about being creative and then using the data, and kind of random, but like the way marketing is changing, and the way creatives are having all this available technology, through apps and softwares to be more creative. So going forward, how much do you think this like Marpipe will help creative people be more creative, and like think how far that's going to push people in a good way? And what's your take on that?
We we want to really focus on helping people become more creative. And I think the way to do that is by giving them access to more information about what people like and what people want, but making sure that they don't just fall into the trap of giving people exactly what they want. So what I mean by that is when you're looking at aggregate data, right? You can see these trends emerge, and we want to show people these trends, right? So you're in, say, the beverage industry, right? 1,000 companies are making ads in like this same exact way, but they all work really well when they use this particular template. What you might see is convergence across the industry, right? So like if you give people data and say, "Hey, here's an ad that works really really well in your industry," everyone's going to use it, and that what can happen is that completely stifles creativity, right? But what's important is once you get that convergence, the ads will stop working so well because everyone sees it and everyone gets used to it, and that's when creativity is the most important. At that point you need divergence, right? And creativity is a lot, it's about divergent thinking. I think what will happen is we'll see these kind of waves, and you'll get this convergence where an ad works really really well, everyone starts doing it, and then the industry leaders, these chief creatives of these massive agencies, and even the small time brands that are super clever, they're going to create these new templates, these new ideas, these new types of ads, and they'll be really successful for a while, and then all this data starts flooding in. This is what works, there's another convergence, and there's more so it's this cycle, this continuous cycle. And I think data actually helps that cycle, because the more feedback you have on what works and what doesn't, the quicker you can have convergence and divergence. And I think right now there's a huge amount of time that passes between each convergence and divergence, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was actually you're actually kind of answering one of the questions that I was gonna ask is with your software. So let's say about going back to the mug, and I do the mug in space, and it's doing really well. Have you guys thought about, or has your clients thought about, or and you kind of maybe you already just answered it, but so I have this mug that's in space, it's doing really well. It hits all the check marks with your software, Marpipe, and do you use the same, like, everything, like, the same variants for the next mug? Or like you said, do you ride it until, "Okay, we need to switch it up a bit"? How, like, have you guys, like, you kind of probably answered that, but, like, Have people asked you that, or is that something that people think they can do?
There is this idea of ad fatigue
Yeah.
where an ad, yeah. So the ad works really well for a while and then it just stops working. And I think component data has a huge advantage here because what'll typically happen is an ad fatigues, you have no idea why. There's really no reason behind it. It just stops working. You're like, okay, I need to stop running this. And then, somewhere down the line, you're gonna say, let's run this again and see if it works. And basically keep doing that until you can run it again or just consider it a dead ad. But there are two advantages to component level data. One, you can more quickly isolate why an ad isn't working. So if an ad starts fatiguing, you might find that it's actually just the orange background that's fatiguing and not the ad itself, not the concept behind it. You might find that it is the way the product is presented in the ad, but not the concept itself. And again, the concept is really that big idea, the thing that brings all of those things together that's making it effective. So what you can do is you through continuous testing, you basically have this top performing ad and you say, let's let's systematically test one aspect of this ad at a time. So we know that the mug works really well in space and it has, say, your typical brand on it, right? But it starts fatiguing. You don't know exactly why. So what you have to do is you start testing only the background, right? Instead of space, now let's put it on a beach. Now let's put it on a cloud, right? So you start changing these things systematically, and eventually you'll find the thing that works again, and you get back to that super successful hero ad that you had before. And that's kind of the cheat code for ad fatigue right now.
No, that's yeah, I think yeah, you nailed it because yeah, ad fatigue for sure. So kind of for people who don't understand digital ads, would people using your software save money long term, or are they gonna how is that gonna benefit them financially? Like, okay, we have two ads running, it's A/B testing, it's costing us this much, but if we use Marpipe, like what is the significant difference if there is any?
There are two key differences. The one is the creative production cost, right? If you're paying 40 people to make ads versus 40 people to come up with good ideas, the good ideas are going to be way more effective in making money because your ads are going to be better just from a creative production cost. So we cut down your cost significantly because now you can use the software to make 1,000 ads rather than people to make 1,000 ads, which and I promise our software is going to be infinitely cheaper than 40
Yeah,
creative salaries.
yeah,
Basically, there's this trade-off between the amount of time that you test and the amount of time that you scale, right? What is ideal is having the smallest, cheapest testing period and the longest, most expensive scaling period, right? You really want to know for sure this ad's going to work and be able to spend $1 million a year and it's going to return you $50 million a year, right? Like that's ideal. And what you need to do is you need to figure out which ad is going to give you that return in the least amount of time with the least amount of money so that you can spend more on scale. So what Marpipe allows you to do is it allows you to shorten that testing cycle. Usually when people run tests, everyone has their own campaign cycles. When you're testing, you're usually just looking at the ads, right? I talked a little bit about this before, and you might say, okay, like this ad works better than the other 10. I'm going to run it until it dies. Problem with that is you don't really know why the ad is effective. So the test, it's almost like you're getting imperfect information with a simple A/B test. What Markpipe allows you to do is it allows you to get more information about why things work. So rather than saying this one ad works better than these 15 ads, you get these 10 ads work better than the other 90 ads, and they work better because they all have this particular background. So now, forever, for all the ads I'm going to run until this component fatigues, they're going to have this background, and I know that it's going to outperform all these other backgrounds. So, one, you have way more confidence in what works, and two, you're able to scale more ads because you've run more. So those are kind of the two big payoffs there. And then with consistent testing, you collect more and more data, and data is essentially this gold mine, right? So
yeah.
you have after a few months, it actually becomes more and more dangerous because not only do you get to keep your CPAs as low as you did with that first really effective ad that you found, but also now you have multiple components that are effective. You know this background works. You know this angle of this product works. You know this demographic of model works on this audience, and so on. So you collect more and more data. Even getting even to like the rhetoric of copy. There's just so many things that you can test. The more information that you have, the more effective your ads get, and you can kind of it's compound interest, right? You just keep learning.
So not only does Marpipe help financially, but even work wise, like workload and like you said, people can focus on other aspects of the business while Marpipe is doing its job.
Yeah, exactly. That's almost the key. Is I mean, that's what a tool is, right? Core humanity. Is we want to the most that you can really do is learn and speed up processes. And I think what we're building is exactly that. We're maximizing the amount you can learn from advertising, and we're speeding up the amount of time that it takes in order to learn.
So how long do you need for to run it, like to run a test to see, like first time using Marpipe and then doing an ad? How long do you guys need, or does the software need to pick up data to kind of see what's working and what's not?
We always make sure that we do everything in 7-day increments. Key to get rid of seasonality. So that means, like, Monday you might get no purchases, and Saturday and Sunday you might get 1,000. So
Yeah.
you want to make sure that you're hitting all of those days. So we always do everything in 7-day cycles. The shortest cycle that we will run is 7 days. So we basically just do everything, but it depends on like how much it costs to get a purchase or a click, a like, whatever you're aiming for, and how much money you're putting behind it. So there is this idea of statistical significance, which is basically when you can say with 95% confidence the things that we just learned are true. And so we always aim to get statistical significance. So basically, you just have a little calculator of, like, okay, this is how much it costs to get an acquisition. This is how much money we're willing to put behind the campaign, and this is how many variables we want to test. Which means, if you have three variables and they each have three variants, right? So a variable would be background, and you have blue, red, orange. Those are three variants. So that would be 3 by 3 by 3. So you have 27 ads, right? So then you just do quick math. Okay, we're doing this on Facebook. You have to have a minimum of $1 a day. So the minimum is $27 per day for a week. Does that get us to statistical significance? Yes or no? And that's going to be based on your cost per acquisition. If your cost per acquisition is 10 cents, it's going to be probably 27. So yeah, 2,700 acquisitions. You're going to have way more than you need for significance. So we basically just do everything based on significance at the component level.
That's
Um,
pretty, man. That's pretty cool. Like the more you talk about it, the more, because I love this type of stuff, because it's creative and it's data driven and it's the future. Like okay, now, like you kind of said, the three stages of advertising. What is the next stage? Because, and like I was saying earlier, with all that people have now, like creative people have now available to them, to make them more creative, to make ways to reach people, connect with them emotionally, and kind of what you used to do is emotional decision making for purchases. It's very interesting. Kind of a two-part question. Like your target market, I guess, would be, like I said, I'm guessing digital market agencies who run ads for other businesses. You would also have businesses who have their in-house digital marketing team. Is there anyone else, or is that it, or how is that going to work?
we can generally work with any kind of advertiser. There is a second audience that we think is interesting, which are artists and graphic designers who are outside of the advertising world. We think it could be really interesting to see people making 100 versions of an art piece that they've created, testing that on ads, and then only selling the ones that work the best in advertisements, because basically only manufacturing, because that can save manufacturing costs. So we think it's really interesting from that perspective. We haven't seen it used that way yet, but we also haven't marketed that way. So we'll we'll see what happens.
That's pretty interesting. Just to play like devil's advocate, I'm not an artist. Like I'm awful at drawing, but to them it's like this is my art. I'm not going to change it for anyone. You know what I mean? Do you see that being a thing?
Yeah, it's totally possible. I think there are different types of artists.
Yeah.
I mean, I think especially creative people tend to be more different than generalizable. So I think it's hard to say what the response will be. But I will take a note from Stefan Sagmeister, who is, I don't know if you know him, but he's like a designer that really pushes the idea of objective beauty. And the way that he does that is by surveying thousands of people and saying, what's the best shape? What's your favorite color? If you ask thousands and thousands of people, there's this like one particular shade of blue that you'll get. Or if you ask thousands of people, people always say that a circle is the best shape. So you can get things like this where there is large consensus about what looks good and what people are willing to put money towards. And I think that essence is part of a lot of artists' work. I think that is something that can help people make more money. And I think at the end of the day, artists, there are two types of artists, right? They're the artists that are doing it because they love the art and it's a passion project, and there are artists that like need to live.
It's true. Starving artists. Right now, do you have any competitors, or is anyone else doing this? Or are you guys the first, or what's that like?
Yeah, so there is a competitive landscape. There aren't people that are doing exactly what we're doing. There are tons of different companies that are trying to do creative data. What a lot of them do is look at historical information. So they'll say, okay, this you've run 1,000 ads before in your company's lifespan, and based on that, we're going to run a bunch of models to analyze that and say what components we think are effective. And then there are companies that will also project into the future. There are companies that will say, okay, like here, if you made these ads, this is what we think will happen. And I think they both have pros and cons. What I think they're missing is like the real time information. Kind of where we fit in is we're doing present time creative data, right? Like we're actually creating data for you as time moves on, right? In real time. So we're testing in a month, and then you have the data for that month, which because it's the closest moment to now is likely going to work. I think that's another big differentiation point is like we're giving you real data that is immediately actionable. And most of the companies that are trying to do creative data just haven't taken this angle. The most recent instance of whatever you're trying to project, and you basically just take that and say, we think it's going to last this long, and then you get less and less confident and less accurate the further that you project out. So I think what happens with historical data is it's kind of stale, and with simulated data, obviously it's not based on anything in reality. So what we're doing is we're trying to take the things that are the most immediate and projecting them, and that's what happens to be the most accurate. I think that's another big differentiation point is like we're giving you real data that is immediately actionable, and most of the companies that are trying to do creative data just haven't taken this angle. And the other piece on multivariate testing, there was one company, I think they're called Ad Basis, that did it, and they got bought by Airbnb in a few years. They were doing something similar. But the big thing is like there are companies that do each part of what we do. So there are companies that will batch render creative. There are companies that will batch upload creative. So, put 1,000 ads on a Facebook for you. And there are companies that try and give you data, as I was just saying, in those two different ways. There's no one who actually just ties the entire process together and lets you do it all in one platform. So that's the other big key differentiators. Like it's a one-stop shop. You come in, you do your testing, you get your data, you repeat, right? You don't have to have this fractionated Martech, space. I mean, Martech's got 7,000 companies. I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah, for sure. So, like I said, I love the idea and I think it's great. But you kind of said earlier that you guys are small, like smaller company, still kind of new. And I don't know like much about the SaaS world, but do you need a patent, or is there anything that like lets you own this like type of theory and idea, machine algorithm type of, you know what I mean? Do you guys, is there something that protects you from other bigger companies?
The thing that protects us is that we're better.
Okay.
I think in terms of IP, the multivariate testing is not something we invented. It's like
Yeah.
an 1800 statistical technique. There have been people that have done it before. No one's actually been able to make the simple interface that we've made for the ad builder. We're currently operating under the assumption that people still won't be able to figure it out, and that we're way ahead of the curve right now. I'm sure there will be tons of larger companies with more money that try to replicate us. Our other big moat is essentially we're going to offer the early ad builder and early beta for free to a number of users. That way, once we have everyone onboarded, we'll be able to aggregate their data and give them way more value. Because once we have a few thousand users, we can start segmenting by industry, like I was talking about before. And if you're someone who, again, is selling beverages, I can tell you, hey, this ad's going to work for you based on like all the other companies using the platform that beverage companies. And that's going to give a huge advantage to our users. And I think that would be a massive barrier to trying to switch to someone else who's just replicating us.
It's gonna be interesting, and I'm excited to see what happens down the road. I guess you're making a splash, and you're making a splash in the water, right? Because people are gonna want this service for sure.
I think so too. Hopefully, we're making a huge splash, maybe like a tsunami in the ocean rather than a splash in a pond. But
Okay, for sure. So, kind of talking about more on you on this side for this question. Like for me, whenever I watch a commercial where I see ads online, where I always look at the marketing side. And so now when you look at something like when you're not working, do you relate it back to Marpipe? So let's say you're on social media and you see an ad and it's like, why would he do that? Why would he put that there? Why is it that color? It should be this color. His target audience is this age group. Why is he using red? That's a bad idea. Do you ever get those moments?
Yeah, Frank, can I tell you that I do this not just with ads anymore? I walk around the world and I see component analysis everywhere. Oh, I'm looking at my computer right now. I see there's a keyboard, there's the camera, there's the battery, and all these things have these different percent value to the entire product together. Yeah, but in terms of ads in particular, I definitely think a lot about the aggregate data that we've pulled. And when I look at, especially certain industries where we have a lot of CPG customers, for example, that have those like super low cost products, which means they have super high return on their ads. So we get a lot of data from the CPG customers. Every time I look at a CPG ad now, I just think of all of the things that we found and try and apply them and be like, oh, this person can be doing this a little better. This person can be doing this a little better. Sometimes I even think like, oh, I should reach out and just like be like, hey, here's an idea. Unfortunately, I don't have time to reach out to everyone.
Yeah, you must be busy like building this new empire.
Yeah. I do have a lot to do.
So yeah, still staying with you. Like I think we met because of the blog was about creativity, right? So that's where I threw my piece on. So to you, like this kind of like you personally, what sparked creativity for you? Like what was there a turning point in your life at some point where was it just natural or what's your story behind that?
That is an interesting question. Let's see. When I was young, I was definitely not into listening to people, which I'm sure every kid can relate to. Like, you just I was particularly strongly anti-authoritarian, and I think that's where my creativity comes from. When people try and say, "Hey, you should do things this way," I'm thinking, "Okay, this is how they think they can best do this operation. There's probably a better way or a more fun way." So I'm always kind of looking at everything that I do and saying, "What's a more fun way of doing this?" And I think that's where a lot of creativity stems from. The other piece also is I've always been obsessed with experimentation and just like I think I learned the scientific method in whatever like third, fourth grade, and the day that I learned that completely changed me. Like I wish I could have my parents on here to just be like, yeah, I would just run around outside and like bash rocks open and then just look at all the little pieces and be like, okay, like how can I use this? What tests can I run to make this rock more interesting? I kind of just have always applied a rigorous, systematic approach to everything I do. And I think that actually makes me more creative. I think there's kind of this idea that like creativity is this like woo woo hippie, like you just come up with shit on the spot. And it is absolutely not like that at all. I think creativity comes from rigorous, systematic work on a problem. The moment when you solve something is always a moment of relaxation, but that's because you've already done the hard work of analyzing and testing and throwing shit at the wall 1,000 times and seeing what sticks. Eventually, you just have that aha moment of like, oh, okay, that's what works because you've already thought about it for 100 days in a row. Where my creativity comes from, at least, is this like combination of rigorous, systematic experimentation, anti-authoritarianism.
No, it's a good story because I had a friend. I was talking to someone in a future podcast, but we were talking about you don't want to should on everyone, right? Telling you should do this, you should do, and I loved what you said, where oh, that's what they think I should do, but really there's probably another way to do it, a better way or a more creative way, and I think that kind of because you kind of I think kind of for me for my creativity is like you kind of had to go against the grain, and kind of you had to be like, nah, I think there's a cooler, more interesting, different way to do it. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but just because it's not the normal way doesn't mean that we can't do it. And I think what you just said is, you're bashing rocks, you were experimenting, you're trial and erroring, which is a big part of being creative. And like, does this work? Does this not work? And now look where it brought you. You're making this SaaS program that is going to integrate with Facebook and Instagram and now Google. So it's pretty interesting how bashing rocks brought you to here.
Yeah. Bashing rocks turned into bashing ads.
Yeah, for sure. As we finish off, is there anything more that you want to talk about Marpipe that you want to let people know about and something about you?
The last thing I would want to say about Marpipe is you can totally use us to make memes. And
Oh
in fact,
yes.
we have made batches of hundreds of memes at a time and have done really well on Reddit. So I highly encourage us.
I'll have to check those out. I'm interested now. Now we're talking. No, I'm joking. But I actually have one more question. Is about for so now you have the software and you have you have your social media platforms, and I've seen you on I've seen the Marpipe's account on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. Are you going obviously you're going to use it for yourself for your personal brand, like your company brand? How has that worked so far?
I'm so happy you asked that question. Yeah, so that is the ultimate game for us is testing our own ads. So we've done this pretty much from day one. We already have collected a good amount of data on ourselves. We have a few different directions with our own ad testing. I mean, one is to just always be ahead of everyone and collecting as much as possible. That way, we can always provide any kind of direction that anyone else needs, and just always kind of trying to be on the cutting edge of testing. But in terms of direction, we have this grand vision of using testing in order to create new brands. So essentially, the idea is you test before you have a product, right? So we've always talked about being able to do product market validation with testing, right? So you have an idea, you split that into 10 different varying ideas, within say the beverage space again, right? So you have 10 different beverages that you think are going to be hits. You run all of those also with different branding and different types of copy. So you basically figure out which product people want the most, what branding they want for that product, and what ads they're going to respond to the most, all in one shot. So you create this new brand. Once you get a bunch of signups for the thing, that's when you start manufacturing whatever the product is, and then you just hook it up. So you can automate drop shipping. So we just hook it up with whatever manufacturer, have it port to the ads, continue to run ads, and continue to collect data because we already have the system in place. So, and then we just grow it naturally, basically without having to touch anything. So we have the site automatically made. We have the whole logistics of the drop shipping automatically set up. And essentially what we can do then is get a little more creative with our testing. Whereas when we're testing ads for ourselves, it's just for Marpipe, it's just a SaaS platform, right? And it's in marketing. So that is our specific domain. But once we start setting up these little small businesses everywhere, what we can do is automate that testing, get a little more creative, and figure out industry insights that are also ahead of the curve because we're able to use all the aggregate information. So then we can start setting up little businesses in every CPG sector and just getting that data and then feeding it back into our customers and basically saying, hey, like we've tested all this crazy stuff on our own products, basically just trying to break even just to be able to continue testing. So, really just a game of survival for those side companies. And we pour that data back into the platform. So that's kind of the long vision for testing on ourselves.
Man, that was good, man. I was like, whoa, that like you drop drop shipping. Now I'm thinking about how to use Marpipe for drop shipping. So kind of like so basically you're gonna have a way to start a brand without actually having a product, and then it'll just be all automated. Like, is that what you're saying? Like you can have a product and then you already have the data how to promote the product and you'll all be connected. Like are you gonna like you said drop shipping, so I guess somehow Shopify is involved?
Yeah, yeah. We're totally integrating with Shopify like as soon as possible.
Oh man, that's so cool. Now that's okay. Now that's crazy. Well, that's awesome, man. Oh, cool. So yeah, like I don't even want to finish like now. We got to keep going. How is that going to work for the small business owners, like the small merchants on Shopify using Marpipe?
I can't speak to how Shopify works exactly. I don't know like the ins and outs of it, but the idea is essentially just around product market validation and in general trying to invent new products through advertisement. And I think all the smaller like startups and small companies that are on Shopify with their CPG brands, like there are so many companies out there doing whatever it is that you're doing or whatever it is you're selling. Speak for Marpipe, there's 7,000 martech companies. Any CPG brand, if you're in the beverage space, there's thousand brands, you're competing with Pepsi, Coke. Really, you need to be constantly creating something new that is more valuable than everything that is already out there. And I think the only way of doing that is just test, 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 test. The cheapest way of doing that is testing without manufacturing. So if you can test, people know what things taste like, people know what things do to them, they know how they interact with whatever you're selling at this point. If you can just test every possible combination of whatever it is that's in your industry and figure out what people are going to buy before you actually make it, saves you tons of money, can make you way more successful because if you have a small business, every single dollar counts. Like you can't waste a penny because you might go out of business the next week. I think that if people are able to use Marpipe to like test 1,000 ads before testing 1,000 actual products and going out of business, like that would be incredible.
Man, that's so smart. That's really creative. That's so creative, and that's moving forward. That's like now that's a game changer. No,
Yeah,
that's pretty cool, man.
thanks. I really hope so.
Yeah, man. So how are you guys gonna stay like are you trying to go global or just like North America, or how's that gonna work?
So we already work with some global brands. So I think that what'll probably happen is it's not really going to be our decision of whether or not we stay in the country or not. I think it's kind of just dependent on the companies that end up using us. We've actually seen a decent amount of signups for our waitlist from around the world. Especially interesting enough, Germany it tends to be like really interested and really ahead of the advertising game, which I guess makes sense because they have that like rigorous engineering mentality.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of like Latin American companies signing up, a decent amount of like Chinese, Japanese companies as well. So we are seeing just like interest globally, which is cool to see. So I think we're not going to restrict it. We're just going to let people use it. That'll just give us another aspect of data to differentiate with. You know, we could say, okay, here are the ads within the beverage industry that work in China, and here are the ads that work in America. And so yeah, I think it's really more up to the customer base than us.
Man, it's so cool, and I loved everything you said, and it was so insightful, and it's exciting. Like I'm excited to see what happens, and I'm looking forward to it. What would be the final takeaway for everyone listening, whether it's about you or advertising, creativity, Marpipe, just something that you want to finish off with?
Yeah, the biggest takeaway is to test everything. Whenever
Always
you
be
come
tested.
to a decision point, just test it. Test all your options.
Just yeah, keep testing for sure. Perfect, man. So thanks for your time. I appreciate you taking your time out of your day to do this with me, and I'm really looking forward to what you and Marpipe are doing down the road.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me on. This was like an excellent conversation, Frank. You're an excellent host.
Thanks, man. Cheers. Okay, well, I'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Cheers. Take care.
To learn more about Marpipe, go to www.marpipe.com. Find Marpipe on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Marpipe, Marpipe. To reach Brett, you can find him on LinkedIn under Brett Friedman. We are at the end of the podcast. Thank you for listening. Like, subscribe, follow, connect, share with a friend. Find me online. Head to my website to learn more, frankenzi.com, FrankienZi. Go to my website for daily blogs. Find me on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, Pinterest, YouTube, and of course here on the Anchor app, FrankienZi. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Figure
It
out.
podcast. Living
That marketing. Life. Fuel. Marketing.
through
Education. Inspiration. And motivation.